The night has grown deep. Outside, gentle raindrops are tapping on the old windows. The world is quiet now. You're safe, warm, and ready to drift away. Tonight's story is slow and soft, a tale wrapped in memory and silence. Let it carry you gently, like a calm river flowing through forgotten time. Before we begin, if you enjoy quiet moments like this, subscribe and follow the story each night. Close your eyes, take a slow breath, and lose yourself in the story, as sleep begins to whisper from the edges. The night is quiet now. Outside, soft raindrops tap against the glass. A breeze rustles through the trees, carrying with it the scent of old wood and iron. Tonight we drift into memory, to a story from long ago, a place where time moved slowly, and every echo had meaning. Close your eyes, breathe in. Hate us. Go back to 1887, in the northern hills of Pennsylvania. There was a small, sleepy town called Willowmere. It sat quietly near a river bend, where fog curled gently across the water. The town had little noise, few visitors, and one factory that stood apart from everything else. A large, soot-stained building, its chimney always smoking, its windows always glowing orange. It was called Darwin & Sons Iron Works, founded by three brothers, Henry, Robert, and George Darwin. They were not wealthy, but they believed in building things with their hands. They made tools, strong, simple tools for working men. Hammers, chains, pliers, clamps, the kind of things that built houses and railroads. On the first day of operation, only 12 workers showed up. They arrived with tin lunchboxes, wool coats, and quiet eyes. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. The sound of metal striking metal said enough. The furnace was lit. A slow hum filled the air. Thick smoke drifted upward, and the first hammer fell. Lunch came at noon. A bell rang once. Men stepped outside and sat under the tall trees. Their lunches were plain bread, cheese, maybe an apple. Some carried tiny radios. Crackling jazz music drifted through the leaves. No one said much. Just the occasional cough and the sound of chewing. Inside, the air was heavy. Grease stained the floors. Chains hung from above. Heat pressed against every wall. But no one complained. They were proud of the work, even in silence. Behind the factory was a pond. Men washed their faces there. Sometimes ducks swam by. They called it our little lake. One old worker was always there, Joseph Burns, known as Old Joe. White beard, slow steps, but sharp hands and sharper eyes. He handed every new worker their first hammer and always said the same thing: hold it firm, let it guide you. As evening came, the sound inside the factory slowed, but it never stopped. Machines groaned softly. The furnace hissed like a sleeping animal. Outside, Willowmere turned dark. Lamps flickered on. People went to sleep. But the factory stayed awake. So did the men inside, shaping metal, shaping their lives. This was just the beginning. Weeks passed slowly in Willowmere. The factory settled into rhythm, a quiet, steady pulse in the town's heart. People no longer noticed the smoke. It simply belonged to the air. Each morning, the iron bell rang at 5:30. Its deep, hollow tone echoed through narrow streets. Children heard it in their sleep. Their fathers had already left. Inside the factory, work began the same way every day. One by one, men entered, hung up their coats, and stood at their stations. The first hour was always silent. No talking, it's just focus. Metal, fire, sweat. The tools they made weren't glamorous. No one ever asked who made them, but they mattered, and the men knew it. They made pliers that would fix engines, wrenches that would help build ships, hooks strong enough to lift beams into place. Each item had weight, not just in pounds, but in purpose. The youngest worker was 17. His name was Samuel. He'd lied about his age to get hired. He wanted to help his mother. No one asked questions. They simply handed him gloves. He worked beside Old Joe. At first, he was clumsy, dropping tools, misjudging heat. But Old Joe never raised his voice. He simply said, "Try again. Slower this time." And Samuel did. Day by day. He learned to listen to the metal. It had a voice, faint but real. A whisper in every strike, every grind, every bend. Lunch was quiet, as always. Men sat on crates or leaned against trees. No loud laughter, no shouting, just small bites, careful chewing, and eyes half closed. Sometimes someone would hum, slow tuneless hum that matched the wind. By evening, faces were smudged with soot. Shirts soaked with sweat, hands red from heat. Still no one hurried home. I sat for a while after work, washing at the pond, watching ripples drift across the surface. Samuel asked old Joe one day, "Why do you stay so long after the whistle?" Joe smiled slowly. "Because silence doesn't come easy. You have to earn it." That night the bell rang again, once low and distant. The machines rested. The fires dimmed. And Willowmere once more fell asleep. As summer turned to fall, Willowmere's trees blushed red and gold. Crisp wind flowed through narrow alleys. Leaves gathered at the factory gate. Time, as always, moved gently. Nothing much changed. At the factory, nothing much changed. But the sound of boots on concrete now echoed just a little deeper. The mornings arrived colder, began arriving early. They had to warm the building. Before metal could be shaped, their breath fogged in the air, mixing with smoke. Men wrapped scarves around their necks, pulled caps lower over their ears. The hammering continued, only slightly slower than before. There was comfort in repetition, each task known by heart, each tool in its place. Samuel now worked alone. Old Joe watched from the corner. The boy had become steady, every movement purposeful. Sometimes Samuel spoke softly to the metal, like he was taming a wild horse. No one found it strange. They all had their rituals. Each man had his bench, his tools, his silence. It was their world, and they respected its stillness. In a back corner of the factory stood an old bulletin board. Faded notices hung there. Picnic flyers from years ago, safety tips, a photograph of 3 brothers, Henry, Robert, and George. No one spoke of them much anymore. They had long since moved on, retired, or passed quietly. But their names were still carved into the beam above the main door. Darwin and Sons, carved by hand. Letters worn smooth by time. Once a week a man from the city came. He wore a bowler hat and wire spectacles, checked ledgers, counted crates, and left without speaking. The workers called him the Shadow. He never smiled, never stayed long. Just a reminder that the world outside still existed, but inside the factory, the rhythm stayed the same. Lunch still came with a bell. The men still sat by the trees. They still ate quietly, chewed slowly, wiped their mouths with handkerchiefs. Sometimes Samuel sketched in a notebook, tools, mostly hammers, joints, gears. Once, he drew the furnace itself. It looked like a sleeping beast. Old Joe nodded when he saw it. "She's alive, all right," he murmured. Evenings came earlier now. The sun dipped faster behind the trees. Orange light spilled through factory windows, turning metal gold for a moment. That light didn't last long, but it was always beautiful. At 6 o'clock, the final whistle blew. Men stood slowly, stretched aching backs, wiped hands on cloth, and for a few quiet minutes they simply stood, letting the stillness settle around them. Then one by one they left, and Willowmere went to sleep again. Winter came quietly. It didn't shout or rush. It simply arrived one frost-covered morning, like a soft knock at the door. Willowmere turned pale. Snow settled on rooftops, and bare trees stood like statues. The river slowed, then froze at the edges. At the factory, the rhythm did not stop. It never had, never would. At least that's what they believed. Men arrived in thicker coats. Their boots crunched across ice. Scarves wrapped high over noses. Gloves stiff with cold. Inside, the furnace roared louder. It was their sun now. They gathered near it in the early hours, hands outstretched, faces quiet and grateful. Samuel had grown taller, his shoulders broader, but his eyes still held wonder. He had begun asking questions. "Joe, how long have you worked here?" Joe chuckled softly. "Too long to count, not long enough to forget." They laughed, not loudly, just enough to echo once across the rafters. On Mondays, the men cleaned their stations. They oiled the presses, swept dust into piles, sharpened tools with long, slow strokes. Everything had its place and its time. Even the quiet had a schedule. Every now and then, a tool would break, or a machine would jam. No one panicked. They fixed it. Together, without fuss. Samuel liked those moments best. Said it made the factory feel alive. Joe agreed. Outside, snow piled against the windows. Sometimes it covered the lower panes completely. Inside, the warmth held steady. The iron glowed a soft orange. The men moved slowly but with purpose. Lunches grew warmer, thermoses filled with broth, stew wrapped in cloth to keep the heat. Steam rose from cups, as men sat in silence. Even the ducks had vanished from the pond. Only their tracks remained, quiet reminder of changing seasons. At dusk, the sky turned pale blue, the kind of blue that only comes in winter, soft and endless. The bell rang at 6, a little duller in the snow. The men packed their tools, stamped their feet, wrapped up once more. They left in 2s and 3s, their breath rising like smoke. Merging with chimney trails that stretched into the quiet sky, Willowmere slept early now. But the factory, even in winter, carried on without complaint. Spring didn't arrive with a trumpet. It crept in slowly, melting snow one patch at a time, as the trees outside the factory began to stretch again. Pale green leaves appeared like whispers, and birds returned to the power lines. You could hear water flowing again. Not loud, just enough to notice. Inside the factory, work continued unchanged. Steel didn't care about seasons. Neither did the furnace. Still, something felt lighter. Windows were opened just slightly. Fresh air slipped in, bringing with it the scent of thawed soil. Joe noticed it first. He said, "You smell that, Sam? The earth's waking up?" Samuel nodded, though he wasn't sure what he smelled. The men's jackets got thinner. Scarves disappeared. So did the steam from their breath. One morning, a robin landed near the loading dock. It stayed there for several minutes. No one moved. No one wanted to scare it away. The robin flew off eventually, but something about it made the whole day feel softer. In April, a shipment was delayed. The truck arrived 2 days late. No one seemed bothered. The workers used the time to fix the gear press in the back. It had been making a strange sound. Samuel led the repair. Joe led him. "Best way to learn," he said, "is by solving problems you didn't cause." They opened the press, found the loose bearing, cleaned the parts with oil and cloth. It took 3 hours. And when the press ran smooth again, the men nodded not. With pride, but with quiet satisfaction. That was the way things worked in Willowmere. The break room was repainted that month, pale blue, to match the sky they rarely saw. Someone brought in a new radio. It only played static at first until Samuel tuned it just right. Faint classical music drifted through the room. No lyrics, just slow, winding notes that seemed to echo between the beams. On Saturdays, the factory closed early. Men went home before sunset. They had dinner with their families, sat on porches, listened to wind in the trees. Even Joe began to leave a bit earlier. He said the evenings felt longer now. Samuel started carving small figures from scrap wood, tools mostly, a wrench, a hook, a tiny anvil. He kept them in a box near his station. Joe saw them once and smiled. "Someday you'll carve the whole factory," he said. Samuel didn't answer, but the idea stayed with him. Outside. Spring rolled on. The pond filled again. Ducks returned. And once more, everything felt like it belonged. By summer, the air in Willowmere turned thick and sweet. You could smell wildflowers even from the factory door. The river moved faster now, its surface blinking with sunlight. Children played near the bridge. Their laughter drifted into the far corners of the town. Inside the factory, the heat rose early. By 10 a.m., shirts clung to backs. By noon, tools felt hot to the touch. Still no one complained. They wiped their brows, drank cool water from tin cups, and kept working. Samuel had grown into the rhythm. Each strike of his hammer matched the beat of the place. Even Joe seemed to rely on him now. He asked less, watched more. There was a fan in the break room. It creaked loudly, turning side to side like a sleepy guard. The men took shorter lunches. It was too hot to eat much. They sat in silence, fanning themselves with folded papers. Someone brought in iced tea. It was kept in a glass jar beside the sink. No one asked who made it, but everyone drank. One Friday, a thunderstorm rolled in. The sky went dark at noon. Lightning cracked like metal snapping. The roof trembled with every boom. The men kept working. Only the youngest looked up. The lights flickered, then held steady. The furnace roared louder, almost as if it welcomed a storm. Samuel stood at his station, calm, focused. Joe smiled, rain streaking the windows behind him. "Some days test you," Joe said, "but they pass." The storm left as suddenly as it came. The air cooled. The metal smelled cleaner, like the factory had been rinsed. Outside, puddles formed between the loading docks. The ducks returned. One waddled near the back door and stared inside, curious. It stayed there a long while, then turned and left. Inside, work resumed as if nothing had changed, and maybe nothing had, but the air felt different. Samuel found himself humming, a low, steady hum he didn't recognize. Joe joined in. So did another man. Soon, the whole room carried the tune. No words, just sound. The factory was singing. By mid-August, the days felt slower. The sun lingered longer in the sky, as if unsure whether to leave. In Willamere's shadows stretched lazily across fences. Cicadas sang in the trees, a steady buzzing lullaby. The factory felt heavier in summer's grip. Its metal walls trapped the heat. The air inside turned still, almost too quiet. Even the machines seemed slower. Belts spun with a soft groan. Hammers dropped with gentler weight, but work continued. It always did. Samuel now led morning checks. He walked the line, inspecting the press, the bolt bins, the furnace valves. Joe watched from his stool, mug in hand, eyes soft with age. "You've got the rhythm," he said. Samuel only nodded, focused on a crooked pipe. The men respected Samuel. He didn't speak often, but when he did, they listened. He didn't rush. He didn't boast, simply understood the work. One afternoon, a new worker arrived. His name was Thomas. Young, wide-eyed, nervous, Samuel gave him gloves, showed him the safety line, the emergency cord, the lunch bench. Joe chuckled. "Just like old times," he whispered. Thomas made mistakes, dropped a clamp, burned his hand on a steel rod. Samuel didn't scold. He said, "You'll feel the rhythm soon. It's not loud. You'll have to listen for it." That evening, the sun turned the factory walls gold. Light poured through every window. The dust inside sparkled like stars. Men stood quietly, tools still in hand, letting the light settle on their shoulders. It felt like a pause, like the world holding its breath. Joe reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded photo. 3 young men in work clothes standing by a brand new furnace. That was the first day, he said. Samuel looked at the photo and saw Joe much younger, same eyes. The photo was worn, edges soft, ink fading. Samuel didn't say much, just nodded. Then slid the photo back into Joe's hand. Outside, the sky shifted to orange. The bell rang once. Men wiped their hands, collected their tools, and stepped out into the cooling air. Another day had passed, slowly, quietly, and Willamere went to sleep once more. September came quietly. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of dry leaves and distant wood smoke. The factory doors creaked more now, hinges swollen from summer, now stiff from chill. The light inside turned softer, as if the sun itself had dimmed. Shadows stretched longer across the floor. Samuel arrived early each morning, before the others. He liked the silence, the way the empty space held echoes. He would walk the floor slowly, fingers grazing tabletops, checking pressure valves, testing the switches. It was a quiet ritual, one he never rushed. Joe came in just after him. He moved slower now, but still arrived before the bell. They rarely spoke in the mornings, only nods, only shared presence. The machine started with a low hum, belts turning, wheels rotating, steam easing from valves. By 7 a.m., the full team was present. Gloves on, aprons tied, positions taken. Outside, trees began to drop their first leaves. They gathered at the factory steps, crisp and curled. Inside, the factory's rhythm returned. Hammer, twist, wipe, stack. The radio in the break room now played softer songs. Instrumentals, mostly low piano, occasional cello. Someone said it made the coffee taste warmer. No one disagreed. One Tuesday afternoon, a belt snapped on the east press. The sound was sharp, but not alarming. The team paused, waited. Samuel stepped forward. He didn't speak. Just walked to the wall, took down a fresh belt, and began replacing the old one. Joe watched, arms crossed, silent approval in his gaze. The others stood nearby, not to help but to learn. Samuel finished the task in minutes. He wiped his hands, nodded once, and stepped back. Work resumed. No applause, just rhythm. Later that day, Thomas asked Samuel, "How did you know it would snap?" Samuel smiled faintly. "It was whispering for days. You just have to listen." Outside, a breeze stirred the fallen leaves. The sky turned a soft gray. Evening crept over Willamere with familiar gentleness. Inside the factory, lights glowed warm and gold. Men moved slower now, not from fatigue, but from understanding. The bell rang. Tools were placed down. Jackets put on, goodnights exchanged. And once again, the factory faded into the night, like it always had, like it always would. October rolled in, draped in fog and amber light. Willamere's trees turned to fire, orange, red, golden brown. The town glowed, mornings came colder now, frost kissed the grass. The sky looked wider, paler, as if stretched too thin. At the factory, the furnace burned longer. Heat welcomed the men, their breath fogging as they entered. Gloves were worn all day, not just for safety, but for warmth. Joe brought a thicker coat. It still bore his name stitched inside, though the letters had begun to fray. Samuel noticed and smiled. The days felt slower again. Not from laziness, but from care. Each movement deliberate, each task given time. The machines, too, seemed to adjust, their sounds deeper, less sharp. Breaks were taken near the back door, where a small bench sat beneath a maple tree. Leaves fell onto shoulders, into open lunch pails. No one minded. One day, a salesman arrived. He wore a clean suit and carried a briefcase full of catalogs and promises. He spoke quickly, offered new machines, faster, smarter, cheaper. The men listened but said little. Samuel stood quietly at the back, arms folded. Joe finally said, "Thank you, but we're not in a hurry." The salesman smiled awkwardly, left a few pamphlets, and walked back to his car. Later that day, the pamphlets were gone. No one mentioned them. The factory resumed its hum. Samuel adjusted a worn gear. Joe replaced a bolt near the lathe. Thomas polished the clamp handles. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves danced across the gravel path. Quiet music, composed by nature. Inside, the same rhythm held. Strike, turn, tap, stack. By late afternoon, clouds rolled in. The light dimmed. The windows fogged slightly, blurring the trees outside. Joe sat by the break room stove, a cup of tea in hand. He stared out at the soft, gray world. Samuel sat beside him. Neither spoke. The silence was enough. When the final bell rang, the men moved slowly, packing tools, buttoning coats. Outside, the air smelled like rain. Not rain itself, but the promise of it. Willamere exhaled. The factory rested. Night, as always, fell gently over it all. November arrived with silence. No fanfare, just bare branches and a colder wind. The trees in Willamere stood like tall bones against the gray sky. Even the river seemed quieter, its surface like glass. The factory doors creaked more often now. Hinges stiff with cold, they groaned with memory. Inside, the warmth still held. The furnace glowed softly, its fire steady, dependable. Samuel began arriving earlier. Before the sun, before the others. He liked the darkness. It's the way shadows moved before light. He said it helped him think. Joe still came in, though his steps had slowed. He walked with a cane now, hand-carved, simple, strong. The men said nothing of it, only nodded as he passed. Mornings began with deeper breaths, longer stretches, and quiet footsteps on cold floors. The break room now held extra blankets, folded neatly in a basket. No one claimed them, but they were used. One day, the radio stopped working. Batch! Just a faint hum, no music. Samuel opened the back, checked the wiring, tapped gently. Nothing. They left it that way. Let the silence return. Thomas found a box of old tools in the back closet, covered in dust, rust beginning to creep in. He brought them to Samuel, who cleaned each one slowly, oiled the joints, wiped the handles smooth. They belonged to the founders, Joe said quietly. Henry, Robert, George, long gone, but still here. The tools were placed on a high shelf, not for use, just to be remembered. Afternoons grew darker now. Sunlight faded by 4. The windows turned mirrors. Inside, the lamps gave off amber light, soft, warm, like candle flames. The factory felt smaller in winter, not in size, but in sound. Voices were hushed, movements careful. Samuel carved small shapes from leftover wood. Nuts, bolts, beams, a miniature world tucked inside a box beneath his bench. Joe watched him once and smiled. The final bell echoed through frost. Men stood slowly, stiff from cold and work. They moved together toward the door, boots scuffing gently, breath like clouds. Outside, snow had started to fall, light, almost invisible. Willowmere waited, blanketed in stillness. And the factory, as always, slept beneath the stars. Before we begin, a quick announcement. Some of you know, our site was shut down in the last couple weeks, but we're now up and running again with the link in the description. We have a ton of new features that we think you guys are going to love. You can view all the stories we've ever told right here in our channel on one easy page. My brothers and I got up and went to the door and looked out into the hall. Everything was fine. She told me that the original owner, her mother, had purchased the house after she and my grandfather had gotten married. In the middle of the night, my father was awoken to the sound of someone walking across the floor in our room. As I mentioned before, it was never a good idea to stay in that room alone. Armed with a screwdriver and a flashlight, we went to the closet in our room and started prying off the wall paneling. Within a few minutes, we found a hole just big enough to fit a small animal through. Excited at the prospect of finding a snake or a raccoon, we reached inside the wall and started feeling around. Whatever was in there was breathing heavily, but we couldn't grab onto anything. After about 15 minutes of searching, we gave up. My brother and I were scared of what we might find, and we filled the hole back in. Strange things would happen. Doors would slam, pictures would fall off the walls, and sometimes you could even feel a cold spot in the room. Or were there other, more sinister things lurking within the walls? I don't know. What do you think happened to the narrator in his brother's room that night? Let us know in the comments. And if you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe. We're always looking for new stories to tell. And if you want to submit your own story, use the link in the description. Most of the time, if you stayed in that room alone, you'd hear scratching in the walls, very similar to the sound of an animal trapped inside the walls. He got out of bed to investigate and saw the distinct set of footprints in the middle of our room where the closet was located. Each step was perfectly outlined in the dust on the floor and appeared to lead directly to the closet. My dad opened the closet door, and there was nothing there. To this day, he swears that the closet was empty and had not been used for storage in several years. At the time, it was just a small one-room cabin. The roof leaked, the walls had huge holes in them, and there was no running water or electricity. With the help of my great-grandfather, they turned that one-room shack into the mansion that it was at the time. According to my grandmother, the house had a history of strange activity dating back to when it was just a small cabin. One time my grandmother was going through the attic and found a small wooden box hidden in the rafters. Inside the box, she found a diary written in cursive by a woman, presumably from the early 1900s. The diary told the tale of a young woman who had been staying in the cabin while visiting family. The woman wrote of hearing scratching sounds and voices coming from within the walls. The diary abruptly ended after an entry stating that the author was going to confront whatever was in the walls once and for all. The diary was never finished, and my grandmother never found out what happened to the author. No sign of forced entry or a struggle of any kind had taken place. The only thing out of the ordinary was that the door was badly scratched up, as if someone or something had tried to claw their way inside. As the years had passed, I've often wondered if what we experienced that night was a hallucination brought on by the storm, or if it was something more sinister. To this day, I'm not sure what exactly happened that night, but I do know that my brothers and I never slept with the door open after that incident. There's a playlist feature so you can save your favorites for later. We even have a membership option for those of you who want to support us and get some extra perks, like submitting questions for us to answer. But we're still free to everyone, and always will be. So go check out our website. Today's story comes from our Reddit page. It's from a user. This happened when I was about 8 years old, back in the mid-1960s, in rural Alabama. We didn't have any electronics in our homes such as televisions or radios. Also, my parents never allowed us to have flashlights in our room due to safety concerns. So we were sitting in total darkness listening to these footsteps. The footsteps stopped directly outside our bedroom door, and we could hear our dog in the next room start to growl and then scream. Seconds passed, and then someone started to slowly open the door. My brothers and I started screaming bloody murder. At the top of our lungs, whatever was outside our door screamed back at us in a voice that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. We kept screaming until the footsteps and the noise outside our door slowly faded away. My family lived just outside a small town of about 2,000 people, which is pretty much nothing in the southern United States. Our home was an older house, built probably in the 1930s, and it had been passed down through my grandparents and great-grandparents before coming into my parents' hands. The home was big, had many rooms, and the master bedroom was huge with at least 4 large closets. My 2 brothers and I shared a smaller room down the hall, and there was another spare bedroom for guests. The house had no air conditioning and only electric heat and a ceiling fan for each room. The summer that this event took place was particularly hot and humid. There was not a day that went by without thunderstorms in the area, and almost every afternoon there were tornado warnings. One night in particular stands out in my mind. The storm had been raging for hours with heavy rains, high winds, and loud claps of thunder. My 2 brothers and I were asleep in our beds when suddenly the front door blew open. As you might imagine, we were freaked out sitting in the middle of our room, wondering what was out there in the darkness. Then we heard footsteps coming closer to our room, heavy footsteps. Being that this was the mid-1960s, in the morning after, of course, my parents had already gone to work. I remember vividly the first time my grandmother told me about the history of the house. Another strange occurrence happened while my brothers and I were living in the house. Then there was the guest room. One day, my brother and I decided that we were going to find out what was in the walls. To this day, I still wonder what was in the walls of that old house. Was it the spirits of the former owners? So this is a steam engine. It's an old one, and it's making a funny noise. And that is because all these parts have been put together by hand, and they were never meant to be put together like this in the first place. That's why it sounds so crazy. In another video we made, someone commented, "It would be cool if there was an AI that could listen to audio clips and tell me what machine it is and how old it is. This is a diesel engine from the 1940s, or this is a steam engine from the 1800s. I mean, you can look at some of these and say, oh yeah, I can totally hear that this is a steam engine from the 1800s. Or I can totally hear that this is a diesel engine from the 1940s. But when you look at some of these, you're like, these A's are really good at finding patterns, but they're not necessarily the smartest. After it identifies the machine, then you have to figure out how old it is. You're essentially creating one giant model, and that gets really complicated really fast. That's even harder because you need a whole separate AI for each decade. I mean, you think about it. If I wanted to figure out how old a car is, we could probably make a pretty good model just for the antique engines. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button. We'll see you next time. But that would be a massive undertaking, and it would take a lot of time. But if you guys are interested in seeing it, let us know. I could look at it and maybe tell what general year it's from. I could narrow it down to 10 years. But after that, it becomes really difficult. If you want to find out exactly what year something was made, it's really hard to do. I mean, just look at some of the results. I mean, this one says it's a steam engine from the 1800s, and it's clearly a combustion engine. Someone uploaded a video of a threshing machine, and they asked ChatGPT to identify the machine and tell them how old it is. And so that's why there hasn't been a version of this released yet. I mean, if you look at some of the results, they're just so bad. It's like, I mean, come on, this is clearly a modern engine, but it says it's from the 1800s. It's not good. And ChatGPT was actually able to do it. It said it's a Link Belt Model B thresher, and it was made in the 1930s. Now you can see that there's no audio in this video whatsoever. It's just a picture, so it makes it a lot easier. But still, that's really impressive that it was able to identify it and tell you how old it is. You can tell that it's not a steam engine. and it's clearly not from the 1800s. But the AI found a pattern where it matched the word steam engine in the year 1800. And so it just put those two together and said, well, this must be a steam engine from the 1800s, but it doesn't really know that it's a steam engine. It just found that pattern in the data. Wait, what? Are you serious? Like this one. It says it's a gasoline engine from the 1930s, and it does sound like a combustion engine. But it definitely doesn't sound like it's from the 1930s. It sounds like it's from the 1980s at the earliest. Same with this one. It says it's a steam engine from the 1800s. But it definitely doesn't sound like it's from the 1800s. It sounds like it's from the 1970s. It sounds like it's been heavily restored recently. Definitely not from the 1800s. And then they had them rate the confidence level of that answer. So they'd say how sure they were of their answer. You can see that they used some recordings from our channel, and that is a big part of the problem because most of these sounds have been heavily restored. They do really sound like they from the time period that they supposed to be from. So it trains this AI on sounds that aren't really accurate representations of the time period. This one's actually a great example of that. It's a steam engine from the 1800s, but it's not just any steam engine from the 1800s. It's a modern replica built in the 1980s. This isn't even from our channel. It's an extreme example of the problem that these AEs are trained on inaccurate data. Then they took that data and fed it to a machine learning algorithm and said, okay, given this recording, this is the answer. And then they compared it to other answers and figured out which ones had the highest confidence rating. Figure out what machine this is. You might look at it and say, well, it looks like it's some sort of farm equipment. It looks to be maybe from the 1940s or 50s. I mean, this one is clearly a man-made object, but it's not a machine. This is obviously a musical instrument, so it's not really accurate to call this a machine. But they labeled it as a machine, and it's probably labeling it based off of the word machine that was in the title of the video. So it's just looking at the title and not really listening to the actual audio. You might be able to guess that much, but you wouldn't be able to tell me what type of tractor it is, or what brand it is, or how old it is. Maybe you'd be able to identify the make and model if it was a more common piece of equipment. But for the most part, you wouldn't be able to tell me anything more than what general time period it came from. Well, here's the thing. It absolutely exists, but it doesn't work very well. In fact, sometimes it's even harder to identify a machine by its sound than it is by its image because there are so many different variables. There's one called Audio Set that was put together by Google, and it has about 285,000 clips of audio. The problem is, they don't really teach you how they did it. They just put it out there for people to use. But there's also one done by Kaggle, and this one is a little bit easier to understand how they did it. For example, how loud the noise is, how close you are to it, how far away you are from it, what kind of background noise there is, and what type of microphone you're using. There's all sorts of things that can change the sound. And so it makes it really hard to accurately identify and tag that sound to a specific machine. It works way better with images and video, but sound is possible, and you can even get it to do it. Just isn't very good at it. So if I handed over my phone to you right now and said, well, it's the same with machines that are making noises, but people did try and several different versions of this exist. What they did was take a bunch of recordings that were publicly available, and then they had humans go through and tag them. So they'd say the problem is it's not very good at it. And that's the problem. Another problem is that some of these recordings aren't even of machines. And that's the thing. There's a lot of problems with this, and this is just the beginning. So if you're retrying to combine two different models together to first identify the machine, and then figure out how old it is. Now that being said, there are some really cool examples of this that do work pretty well. Check this one out. But the point is, you can do it, but it's not easy. You guys want to see a video where we try and make one of these models ourselves? Let us know in the comments below. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. It's 2 a.m. and you can't sleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts, anxieties, and worries about everything and nothing all at once. You toss and turn, staring at the ceiling, willing your eyes to get droopy, but they refuse to cooperate. The clock on your nightstand seems to mock you with its relentless ticking. What makes these silent hours so challenging is forcing us to confront our innermost thoughts and feelings head-on. We may find ourselves replaying past conversations, analyzing every word we've ever said, or dwelling on mistakes we've made in the past. This can be incredibly frustrating and exhausting, both mentally and emotionally. As we continue to wrestle with our thoughts, we may start to feel a sense of hopelessness. We may wonder if we'll ever be able to sleep, or if we're doomed to spend the night tossing and turning in bed. To understand this, we need to look no further than our brains. Our brain activity naturally fluctuates throughout the day, leading to chronic insomnia. If you're feeling anxious or stressed, it can be helpful to practice relaxation techniques such as deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, or meditation. A dark, quiet, and cool room can promote better sleep. Try using blackout curtains, earplugs, or a white noise machine to create a more conducive sleep environment. You should also ensure that your mattress and pillows are comfortable and supportive. These techniques can help calm your mind and body. Certain medical conditions such as sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and circadian rhythm disorders can make it difficult to sleep. If you suspect that a medical condition may be affecting your sleep, it's important to seek professional help and treatment. Caffeine and alcohol can interfere with our sleep-wake cycle and prevent us from getting a restful night's sleep. Try to avoid consuming these substances. CBTI is a type of therapy that has been shown to be effective in treating insomnia. It involves identifying and changing negative thoughts and behaviors that contribute to insomnia. A therapist can teach you how to apply CBTI principles to your own life to help you develop healthy sleep habits and overcome insomnia, especially during the evening hours. It's important to seek professional help. A doctor or therapist can help you identify any underlying causes of your insomnia and develop a personalized treatment plan to help you get the sleep you need. It can hold a special place in the hearts and minds of those who find meaning in it, making it easier to fall asleep. By understanding the science behind our sleep patterns and the factors that affect them, we can learn how to improve our sleep quality and break the cycle of sleepless nights. So if you find yourself awake at 2 a.m., don't panic. Try the tips we've mentioned and be patient with yourself. Sweet dreams. Going to bed and waking up at the same time each day can help regulate our body's natural sleep-wake cycle. 2 a.m. can also hold a deeper spiritual or psychological meaning. Some people believe that the energy of the universe is at its most powerful during this hour, allowing for a greater connection to one's inner self and the world around them. This may lead to a deeper understanding of oneself and the universe as a whole, as well as a greater sense of clarity and insight. Different cultures and belief systems may ascribe different meanings to this hour. For example, in some cultures, 2 a.m. is considered to be a time when the veil between the physical and spiritual realms is at its thinnest, making it easier for spirits to communicate with the living. This belief may be rooted in ancient traditions or personal experiences. It may lead some people to engage in spiritual practices or rituals during this time, making it easier to fall asleep at night. Even on weekends, it's important to stick to a regular sleep schedule as much as possible to maintain consistency, allowing for a deeper connection with one's thoughts and feelings. This can be both challenging and enlightening, bringing up unresolved emotions or traumas that need to be addressed. However, it can also lead to a greater sense of self-awareness and personal growth. Keeping a sleep diary can help you identify patterns in your sleep and wakefulness and pinpoint any potential issues that may be affecting your sleep quality. You can use a sleep diary to track your sleep schedule, the amount of sleep you get each night, and any factors that may be contributing to your insomnia. This can have serious consequences for our overall health and well-being. Regular exercise can promote better sleep, but it's important to avoid exercising too close to bedtime. Aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise most days of the week. There are several things you can do to try to get back to sleep. Here are some tips, including an increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes. If you've been lying in bed awake for more than 20 minutes, it's best to get out of bed and do something relaxing until you feel tired. Lying in bed awake can reinforce your brain's association of the bedroom with wakefulness rather than sleep, making it harder to fall asleep in the future. Fortunately, there are steps we can take to improve our sleep quality and break the cycle of sleepless nights. This can actually make it harder to fall asleep. The clock serves as a constant reminder of your inability to sleep, which can increase your anxiety and make it even more difficult to relax. Instead, try to focus on your breath or visualize a calming scene to distract yourself from the clock and the passage of time. The blue light emitted from our phones. Tablets and computers can interfere with the production of melatonin, a hormone that regulates our sleep-wake cycle. To avoid this, try to put away all screens at least an hour before bedtime. You can read a book, journal, or do some light stretching instead. By understanding the science behind our sleep patterns and the factors that affect them, we can learn how to create a healthy sleep environment and develop good sleep habits. And these fluctuations affect our energy levels, mood, and ability to focus. During the day, our brains are highly active, processing information and regulating our emotions. However, as the day progresses and we approach bedtime, our brain activity begins to slow down. By 2 a.m., our brains have completed the first cycle of REM sleep and are now in the deepest stage of non-REM sleep. This stage is characterized by a significant decrease in brain activity and the temporary suppression of our emotions. However, sometimes our brains fail to complete this final stage of non-REM sleep, resulting in a resurgence of brain activity and a renewed awareness of our emotions. This can be caused by a variety of factors such as stress, anxiety, or even certain medications. As a result, we may find ourselves wide awake at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, and overwhelmed by our thoughts, each second dragging you further into a pit of frustration. You feel like you're battling your own internal chaos, trying to tame the storm inside your head so you can finally drift off to sleep. But no matter how hard you try, the silence of the night only amplifies your struggle. In this video, we want to help you make sense of these heavy, silent hours by discussing what it means when you unsleep at 2 a.m. and helping you find ways to improve your sleep quality. Unable to sleep despite a busy day ahead, you're not alone. In fact, this is a common experience that many people share. According to psychologist Dr. Lisa Firestone, the hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. are often the heaviest of the night for most insomniacs. This is a time when the brain is most active and the body's natural defenses against negative emotions are at their lowest, making it difficult to fall asleep. So if you've ever found yourself in this situation, know that you're not alone. And there might be a deeper meaning behind those sleepless nights. What does it mean when you can't sleep at 2 a.m.? If you've ever tossed and turned in bed at 2 a.m., but why does this happen? During these hours, our brains are essentially stuck in overdrive, making it nearly impossible to fall asleep. It's as if our minds refuse to rest. In some cases, these sleepless nights can become a regular occurrence. What can you do if you can't sleep at 2 a.m.? If you find yourself awake at 2 a.m., don't panic. While it can be frustrating and concerning, 1. Don't lie in bed awake. 2. Avoid using screens. 3. Practice relaxation techniques. 4. Make sure your room is dark, quiet, and cool. 5. Avoid caffeine and alcohol before bed. 6. Establish a regular sleep schedule. 7. Exercise regularly. 8. Rule out medical conditions. 9. Consider keeping a sleep diary. 10. Don't watch the clock. It can be tempting to watch the clock as you lie in bed trying to sleep. 11. Practice cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's important to note that if you're experiencing chronic insomnia, can 2 a.m. have a deeper meaning? Besides being a particularly challenging time for sleep, additionally, 2 a.m. is often seen as a time of heightened intuition and psychic abilities. Moreover, 2 a.m. can be a time of heightened emotions and introspection. It is a moment of quiet and solitude. Ultimately, the meaning of 2 a.m. is subjective and may vary depending on one's beliefs and experiences. While it may not have a universal significance, final thoughts. Being unable to sleep at 2 a.m. can be frustrating and concerning. But it's important to remember that it's a common experience that many people share. It's 2 a.m. and our furnace has just died, and we are in the middle of a snowstorm. I was thinking to myself, what is this place like when it gets dark? What is this town like in the winter? I have never seen it snow this much. My husband and I moved here about 5 years ago from a big city. We were looking for a slower pace of life and a cheaper cost of living. It had 7 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms and a giant yard. We only paid $160,000 for it. And it was very odd. We were going through the attic and we found an old trunk. Inside of it we found old family photos and documents. One of the documents was a deed to the house. On it was the name of the last family that owned it before us. It was the Clayton family. It turns out that Mr. Clayton, who warned us about changing the house, was actually the son of the family that built it. So we found this little town, and we fell in love with it because it had everything we needed. A post office. As soon as the sun came up, the townspeople started showing up, and it wasn't just ghosts that haunted this town, it was also secrets. The townspeople said that the library was haunted by the ghost of the woman who donated the land for it. Her name was Helen Blackwood, and she was a wealthy socialite who had come to town to escape her scandalous past. She had donated the land for the library anonymously, but her secret past had eventually caught up with her, and she had died a mysterious death in the town. They were afraid to tell us the truth about themselves, but we weren't going to let them get away with it, and now we were officially part of it. We had come to this town looking for a simpler life, but we found something much bigger than we could have ever imagined. If you enjoyed this story, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Also check out my podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time. To this day, no one knew what her past was or how she died. They brought us food and water, and they helped us clean up the mess. They also started telling us stories about the town and its history. But the townspeople said that it was haunted by the ghost of the owner. Every building in town seemed to have its own story, its own mystery. And it was clear that the townspeople were hiding something from us. It was also abandoned, but the townspeople said that it was haunted by the ghost of the last prisoner. His name was John Riley, and he had been convicted of murdering his wife. The townspeople said that he had confessed to the crime, but no one believed him. They said that he was innocent, and that he had been framed by his brother-in-law. His name was William Shatner, and he had mysteriously disappeared one night in 1974. The townspeople said that he had taken his own life, but no one knew for sure. A grocery store, a fire station, a library, a community college, a high school. We found old keys that didn't match any of the locks in the house. Maybe there was something special about this house that we didn't understand. But by then it was too late. We had already changed too much. We had ripped out walls, we had replaced windows, we had updated the electrical system, we found old diaries that had cryptic messages about the house being alive. And I was sitting there staring at the furnace, thinking to myself, what is this place like when it gets dark? What is this town like in the winter? Because I had never seen it snow this much. We even found old contracts with builders and repairmen that showed that the house had been repaired many times over the years, yet nothing had been fixed. We sat there all day and all night waiting for someone to come and fix the furnace, but no one did. Came up to us at the Piggly Wiggly and asked us if we were the new owners of the big house on the hill. When we said yes, he warned us not to make any changes to it. He said we should leave it exactly how we found it. It's full of ice. And then we looked around the yard and we realized that all of the trees were dead. Not just in our yard, but every tree in town was dead. He said that the house was part of the town's history, and that we should respect that. He also said that the house had a mind of its own, and that it would drive us crazy if we didn't leave it alone. He thought he was just an old weird guy who liked to stir the pot. So we didn't listen to him. A couple churches, a movie theater, and an old abandoned roller rink. But we just ignored them. Then one day we got a phone call from the local newspaper. They wanted to do a story about the new owners of the big house on the hill. They asked if they could send a reporter and a photographer over to take some pictures. We said sure, why not? It's really a great town. We bought a house that was built in 1910 with beautiful woodwork and stained glass windows. The house was huge. The first few months went by without any problems. But then we started to meet some of the locals and they told us stories about the town and its people. And it was kind of strange and weird, to be honest. The first person that we met was Mr. Clayton. We told them that we knew very little about it, since we had just bought it. But they insisted that we knew more than we were letting on. They said that the house had a reputation in town, and that everyone was curious about it. I tried to play along, but the whole thing was getting weird, so we just ended up hanging up on them. After that, we started to hear strange noises in the house. The next day, the reporter and the photographer showed up and started asking us questions about the house and its history. From that day forward, we never saw the reporter or the photographer again. And the local newspaper never sent anyone over to our house ever again. But one day we found out why. As we looked around the attic, we found more and more things that suggested that this house had a mind of its own. We started to think that maybe we should have listened to Mr. Clayton. But then one day, one of the scariest things happened. Our furnace stopped working, and it was the middle of winter. My husband and I went out and got blankets and sleeping bags, and we piled into the one room of the house that had a fireplace. When the sun came up the next morning, we went outside to see what the damage was. Pipes under the house had frozen and burst. And as far as the townspeople were concerned, we were now officially part of the town. It turns out that our house was just one of many buildings in town that was haunted. In fact, The entire town was haunted. One of the oldest buildings in town was the library. It was built in 1902, and it was the center of town life. Another haunted building in town was the roller rink. It had been abandoned for decades, and then there was the old jail. As we listened to these stories, we realized that this town was not just haunted by ghosts. It was also haunted by secrets. They were afraid to tell us the truth about this town. We found a town full of secrets. Thank you for listening. So when we say ghost gun, what do we mean? Well, this thing, for example, is not a ghost gun, it's a real gun. It has a real serial number, which is proof that it was made in a real factory by real people at a real time. Well, part of the answer is simply that there hasn't been much reason to change them. You see, when a manufacturer makes any modifications to their existing designs, they need to notify the government and receive approval before selling the new version. And if you think that sounds like a hassle, you can read all the manuals in the world, but nothing beats experience. Take a plane, for example. It's a deceptively simple tool. Anyone can learn how to make a flat surface with it, but it takes years to develop the touch and feel needed to work with intricate designs. Some parts were manufactured by the original company, while others were made by independent machinists who reproduced the originals. These tools are over 100 years old. It was a showcase of American industry at the time, sort of like a World's Fair. And the organizers wanted to demonstrate the latest advancements in manufacturing technology, so they hired a company called Madison Norton and Company to build a high-speed precision lathe. They were not just machines, they were works of art. Each one was beautifully crafted and designed to do a specific task with precision and grace. Built in 1908, this saw was a relic from a bygone era. They were not noisy or flashy, but they were incredibly effective. With each stroke of the plane or turn of the lathe, Mark was able to transform rough, unwieldy wood into something beautiful and useful. You can click right here in the card or in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. It was a skill that had been honed over years of practice, and it was a skill that he was passing on to a new generation through his workshops. Its cast iron frame was a testament to the durability of early industrial machines, and its wooden wheels added a touch of nostalgia. They were a link to the past, a testament to human ingenuity, and a source of endless fascination. I was grateful to have had the opportunity to experience them firsthand. But it was not just a museum piece, it was still in daily use, cutting and resawing lumber for new projects. As I ran my hand over the smooth, worn surfaces, I felt a connection to the past, a sense of the skilled hands that had wielded these tools before me. The machine was a success and helped to promote American manufacturing to a wider audience. It was a powerful machine, but also a delicate one that required a steady hand and a sharp blade. Then there was the No. 4, 5, and 6 planes, each with their own unique purpose. The No. 4 was a smoothing plane used for creating perfectly flat surfaces. The No. 5 was a less common rabbiting plane used for creating grooves in wood. And the No. 6 was a shoulder plane used for cutting at an angle. These planes were essential for creating the intricate details that made each piece of furniture a work of art. It was later purchased by the family who used it to make furniture in their workshops, yet they still do the job they were designed to do. With regular maintenance and care, they will continue to turn, shape, and cut wood for many years to come. He believes that it's important to preserve the past so that we can learn from it, and that these old tools are a tangible link to our history. They remind us of the craftsmanship and skill that went into every piece of furniture and that should never be forgotten. The same goes for chisels, lathes, saws, and every other tool in the workshop. Each one has its own quirks and nuances, and it takes years to learn how to tame them. She continued to run the shop until 1974, when she sold the business to Joseph and Robert Perego. The Perego brothers moved the business to its current location and continued to make fine furniture. They also began to specialize in the restoration of antique furniture. In 1998, they sold the business to the current owner, Mark Ferry. Mark continued to build furniture, but soon decided to focus on restoring antique pieces instead. He had no intention of ever parting with the lathe. To him, it was more than just a machine. It was a symbol of the rich history of woodworking in America. Try making some modifications to your own gun for personal use, and you will find that it's outright illegal without the proper licensing. Which brings us to today's topic: old tools. The basic principles of a firearm haven't altered much since their inception. And before that, almost everything was done by hand. In fact, even today, many people rely on hand tools to do specialized jobs. Just ask any woodworker. Young people need to learn how to use these tools, not only for their own benefit, but so that they can keep the tradition alive. After all, there's something special about working with your hands and creating something tangible. It's a connection to the past and a link to the future. Without it, we lose touch with our heritage and with each other. After all, how else do you expect someone to learn the trade? It's just like how teenagers used to work in factories. They had to start at the bottom and work their way up. Couldn't just jump into a management position right away. Okay, only then did they truly understand the inner workings and could make smart decisions about how things should run. Same goes for tools. You need to know exactly how they work and their limitations in order to get the most out of them. You load a projectile into a tube and set off a chemical reaction behind it to make it go boom. What more could you really need? Another part of the answer, though, lies in the fact that changing a gun's design is actually pretty difficult. There are so many different parts that all need to fit together in a very specific way to function properly. And because most guns are made by small independent manufacturers, there isn't a huge pool of resources to draw from. If you want to redesign your product, you need to know every single part inside and out. And if even one of those parts wears out or breaks, you need to be able to replace it. That means the design process is slow and expensive, and often the best that a gunsmith can do is tweak an existing part rather than reinvent the wheel completely. This gun just happens to be 163 years old. Despite its age, it still works perfectly well. So much so that my friend Josh here had no idea it was even loaded with blanks. When he pulled the trigger to show me how it worked, we were both very relieved to see that it wasn't lethal, but still dangerous enough to leave a nice little welt on his hand. And there's something about that idea that a firearm from the 1800s can still be dangerous that just fascinates me. It seems almost otherworldly. Like if I picked up a spear and threw it at someone, they might be annoyed or maybe even hurt, but it would probably break on impact. But a gun from the 1800s, one that was designed to kill, can still threaten life even after all this time. It makes you wonder just how much the world has changed since then. The question is, though, why have guns changed so little in the past 200 years? It also doesn't help that the United States government actively discourages innovation. It's hard to imagine a time before power tools, but they only became widespread in the mid-20th century. But it's not just about knowing how the tools work. It's also about developing the skill to use them effectively. And that's why it's so important to pass down this knowledge from one generation to the next. All the parts of this lathe are original to the machine, except for the motor. Everything else is from the late 1800s. In fact, this lathe was built during the Great Exhibition of 1886 in Philadelphia. After the death of John in 1955, the business was taken over by his widow, Helen. In 2009, Mark opened the shop to the public and now offers classes and workshops in traditional woodworking techniques. As I looked around the shop, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the beauty of the old tools. There was the sash saw, a large circular saw used for cutting doors and window frames. But perhaps the most fascinating machine in the shop was the old Delta 18-inch bandsaw. I said. As I watched Mark work, I was struck by the quiet power of these old tools. I left the shop feeling inspired and humbled by the legacy of traditional woodworking. These old tools were more than just machines. If you liked this video, check out another one where I explore an abandoned tool factory. A dying factory is a potent image in our collective imagination. But what about a dying city? In today's episode, we are looking at an abandoned steel town in Japan and how its citizens coped with the decline of their community. This is beneath dust and time. The factory breathes its last warmth. With fewer and fewer people remaining in Yawata, many of the shops and businesses closed up. We can't help but wonder why anyone would choose to stay behind. We find one such person in Mika Uemura. She's a second-generation resident who never left her hometown. He too stayed behind when everyone else left. But unlike Mika, he decided to use his time in the abandoned town to his advantage. They saw that even in the darkest of times, beauty could still be found. They learned that even when all seems lost, there's always something worth fighting for. It's a story about a way of life that is disappearing in Japan and many other parts of the world. It's a reminder to cherish the moments we have and to never give up hope. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like. Your support helps us keep making great content. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. Thanks for watching. Kazuyo and Mika are just two examples of how different people respond to loss. Both characters display resilience in the face of a changing world. Mika clings to the past while Kazuyo reaches for the future. When the factory closed, Kazuyo found himself with plenty of free time on his hands. How do we hold on to what matters most, while also looking ahead to what lies ahead? The answers may not be easy, but one thing is certain: the human spirit of tenacity and hope endures. At first, he spent his days taking care of his pet birds, but soon he got bored and started exploring the deserted streets. What he found shocked him. There was trash everywhere. People had been coming into the town from neighboring cities just to dump their garbage. Kazuyo couldn't stand to see his hometown in such poor condition, so he started cleaning it up. At first, he did it alone. But as word spread about his efforts, more and more people joined him. They cleared away debris, repaired sidewalks, and planted flowers. Kazuyo estimates that over 1,000 people have come together to revive the town through his efforts. In her documentary titled Steel Town, filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker finds her sitting in the ruins of the Red Roof Club, reminiscing about the past and trying to make sense of the present. Her father worked in the steel plant and her mother took care of their 4 children. Like other factory towns, Yahata was designed with family life in mind. All the housing was in close proximity to the factory. Daycare, primary school, and high school were nearby. Even university was accessible by bicycle. Mika herself got married and raised 2 daughters here. But now her grandchildren have left the town, and she lives alone in a house filled with memories. Schools consolidated, and eventually the town became home to only around 400 people, less than 1/10 of its former population. Now it's like a ghost town from a retro future. Our story begins in the late 1960s, when Japan was experiencing rapid industrialization. One of the key products that fueled this growth was steel. Yet she does just that, choosing to stay in a near-empty town instead of moving somewhere new. Why? Maybe it's because she feels a strong connection to the land beneath her feet. The dust that coats her clothes, the trees that line the streets, and the sounds of birds tweeting in the wind. Maybe it's because there's still beauty to be found in the remnants of the past. Or maybe it's simply the stubborn refusal to give up in the face of adversity. Whatever her reasons may be, Mika is just one example of how some people adapt to change, while others try to hold on to what is disappearing. As the demand for steel rose, so did the need for dedicated communities to produce it. This led to the development of Yawata, also known as Steel Town. It sits deep within Kitakyushu City, which itself is located on the northern coast of Fukuoka Prefecture, the most southwestern of the main islands of Japan. When it first opened in 1968, Yahata was an exciting place. Homes were provided for the workers and their families. Schools were built, stores and restaurants opened. By the mid-1990s, the Japanese economy was heading for rough waters. To stay competitive on an international scale, Japanese companies had to reduce their workforces. On November 27, 1995, the president of the Nippon Foundation announced that the company would be cutting 4,200 jobs. For Yawata, this meant closing down one of its 3 blast furnaces. More job cuts followed in the years after, and with them, a sense of hopelessness began seeping into the hearts of the residents. They saw their friends and neighbors leave, and they knew that if they didn't leave themselves, the same fate would eventually befall them. Parks and gardens were planted, and everything seemed perfect. Life was good. The company even had a slogan: work hard, play hard. There was a softball team, volleyball team, soccer team, marching band, choir, folk dance group, judo club, and even a ski club. There was no shortage of entertainment either. The Red Roof Club, the Green Roof Club, the Blue Roof Club, the White Roof Club, and the Black Cat Club all offered music, food, and drink. But all of this would not last. The turning point came in 2002 when the second blast furnace was shut down. That's when people started leaving in earnest. As we wander through the empty streets, overgrown with weeds and lined with dilapidated houses, in the documentary she says, It's difficult to live in a town where the breath of life has gone out of it. We see another example of this in Kazuyo Komatsu. Kazuyo's actions brought hope back to the people of Yawata. As the sun sets over Steel Town, we are left to ponder our own response to change. The story of Yawata isn't just about a dying steel town. They had to keep moving. Their legs were numb from the cold. The old man tightened his grip on the child's hand. The little girl huddled closer to him, seeking the meager warmth that radiated off his weather-beaten body. He felt her shiver and knew that she was afraid. How could he blame her? But now, looking upon the ruins, he realized that they had all failed. The generals, with their grand strategies, the politicians, with their lofty ideals, the soldiers who had marched into battle, they had all failed, mingling with the dust and ashes of the city. In her innocence, she had asked a simple question: what happened here? But in that question lay the weight of ages, the folly of mankind, the tragedy of war. He wanted to reach out and wipe away her tears, picturing the boy he had heard about in stolen moments. The old man stumbled, catching himself on a broken wall. His hand, gnarled and worn, traced the jagged edges of the stone, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingertips. A whisper in the wind, a fleeting glimpse of happiness. He imagined him growing older, braver, stronger, always waiting for his father's return. The irony was not lost on him. The son he had longed for, the life he had dreamed of, it was all a cruel mockery now. "Calmest," he said, hoping that she wouldn't see through his facade. Just a little further, hold her close and protect her from the world's harsh realities. But how could he? The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a final burst of color before the encroaching darkness. The dark held too many memories, too many nightmares. He quickened his pace, eager to reach shelter before the darkness consumed them. He who had seen too much death, who had buried too many dreams, who had lost his faith in humanity long ago. Huddling together for warmth against the bitter cold, the girl's body shook with chills, and he wrapped his cloak around her. Sharing what little warmth he had, how could he offer her hope when all around them was despair? Stories of bravery and hope, and he watched over her, his heart aching with a fierce protectiveness. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew that he would protect her, that he would keep her safe, because in her innocence, she reminded him of everything that was worth fighting for, trying to shield her from the harsh realities of their world. He spoke of a time before the war, of laughter and light, of love and peace. In her innocent question, he saw a reflection of his own weariness. How much longer could he keep going? How much more sorrow could he carry? It's only the dead remained, their sacrifice a testament to the futility of war, her face peaceful in sleep. Feeling the weight of their shared sorrow, the burden of their journey pressing down on him, he knew that he had to keep going, not for himself, but for her, for the hope that flickered in her eyes, for the dream that whispered on her lips. He had to keep going because in the silence of steel, old hands remember the rhythm. The old man sat there in the silence of the dawning day, remembering a time when his heart had not been so heavy, when his steps had not been so slow, when he had not been so burdened by the past. He carefully shifted her, laying her down on a pile of rubble. He knew that he could not wake her. Not yet. Not until the sun had climbed higher in the sky. We are not the monsters they created. How could he explain the darkness that had fallen upon them, the insidious nature of war that had corrupted even their dreams? Even he, with all his years in battles, the girl was crying now, her tears freezing on her cheeks. Her eyes were wide with innocence, reflecting the horror of the city. He knew that he could not shield her from the truth, not now, not ever. Her eyes were wide with fear, her gaze fixed on the darkening sky. But he would not betray that trust. "They don't hate us," he said softly. "They hate what we have become." This, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "This is what war has brought us." "What happened here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He remembered her gentle touch, her laughter like wind chimes in the summer breeze, her eyes that shone with kindness. How many years had it been since he had last held her, caressed her, loved her? Too many years spent in the darkness, the bitterness of loss clinging to him like a shroud. Felt a chill crawl up his spine as he gazed at the desolation before him, carrying with it the stench of decay and the whispers of the dead. "We must go," he said, turning away from the ruins. "There is nothing left here for us." their faces frozen in masks of pain. They pulled their threadbare cloaks tighter against the wind and pressed on. The city loomed ahead, the searing pain of loss. The girl followed, her small footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. They walked in silence, united by their grief, bound by a shared sorrow. Now it was a tomb, a monument to the folly of war. As he walked through the desolate streets, the ghosts of the past rose to meet him, faces pale and drawn, eyes staring into the abyss. They were the fallen comrades, the friends in innocence, lost in the crucible of war. Dark and foreboding like a rotting tooth against the bruised sky, it was close now. They could feel its presence in the hollow of their bones. And still they walked. There was nowhere else to go. Not for them. Not for any of them. As the gate slid open with a groan of rusty hinges, revealing the smoldering ruins of the city, the once great city was now a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered glass. Buildings were reduced to jagged teeth scraping the sky. Monuments toppled and destroyed. Streets choked with debris. The only sounds were the mournful cry of the wind and the crunch of their boots on broken glass. The old man had fought to liberate this city. He remembered the deafening roar of artillery, the acrid stench of cordite and death. He saw young faces, barely more than children themselves, frozen in mid-scream, their lives cut short. He saw mothers shielding their children, lovers embracing, fathers with arms outstretched as if trying to stop the hands of time. Faces he had known so well, their laughter echoing in his ears, their stories etched in his heart, now lay silent and still. Each step he took was a painful reminder of the cost of freedom, a somber requiem to the fallen. For many years after the city fell, he had carried the burden of guilt, believing that he had failed his people. He looked down at the small hand clasped in his, the tiny fingers like ice against his skin. He knelt down, meeting her tearful gaze. Her tears flowed freely now. The old man stood up, brushing the dirt off his ragged clothes. The wind whipped around them. He started walking again, away from the city of sorrow, away from the ghosts that haunted its streets. He thought of his wife. Then there was the son he had never seen. He closed his eyes. The weight of his memories, both cherished and painful, threatened to crush him. "Are we almost there?" the girl asked, her voice small and hesitant. He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. He forced a smile, trying to make it kind, trying to make it real. They walked on, the ruins fading into the distance, the city's mournful cry growing fainter. As night fell, the old man felt a familiar pang of fear. "Why do they hate us?" the girl whispered, her voice shaking. He stopped, turning to face her. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched slightly, then leaned into his touch. He didn't know why she trusted him. "We are not what they wanted us to be," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. They found shelter in a crumbling building. He told her stories. As the night wore on, the girl's breathing slowed. When dawn broke, he woke to find the girl's head resting on his shoulder, so he sat there watching over her. And as the sun rose higher, bathing the ruins in a soft golden light, this is the story of two lovers whose passion burned brightly, but was destined to be extinguished by the cold winds of fate. In the heart of Seville, where the sun-drenched plazas whispered tales of old, lived a young woman named Isabella. Her beauty was like unto the first bloom of almond blossoms, but like a flamenco dance. There were two sides to their romance, the passionate and the sad. For Diego was a man of two worlds. To her, he was the embodiment of passion, the embodiment of the sun and moon, the very essence of her soul. Isabella found herself face to face with the truth. Diego, the charming rogue who had captured her heart, was none other than El Gitano, the feared leader of the gypsy clan. The sight of the men he led, the lively plazas, and the whispering orange groves, offering little solace. Each corner she turned seemed to echo with the memory of Diego's love. He had been a fool, a liar, and now he had lost the one thing that mattered most to him, his only communion with the woman he loved. He heard a familiar laugh. His head turned, his eyes searching the crowd until they met hers. Isabella stood there, her eyes shining with unshed tears, her lips trembling as she watched him dance. Isabella found herself at a crossroads. The vibrant colors of her life seemed muted, a life where she could be the darling daughter, the prized possession of her family. She walked the sun-drenched plazas of Seville, the very places where she and Diego had shared their first stolen kisses. Now haunted by the memory of their lost love, the scent of orange blossoms, once a symbol of their romance, now stung her with their bittersweet fragrance. A life without Diego, a life devoid of the passion that set her soul on fire. In the time-honored tradition of flamenco, he poured his heart out, all eyes on Isabella, waiting for her response. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, the expectations of the crowd, the hopes and dreams of two families, the future of their love, all resting on her decision. Declaring his undying love for Isabella, challenging her to choose him, to choose their love. Her voice, though shaky, rang with conviction. She chose love, chose Diego, choosing a life with him, come what may. The lively music of Seville turned to a mournful tune. Their love, which had burned brightly despite the odds, their steps echoing the rhythm of their beating hearts, Isabella and Diego stood hand in hand. A tale whispered in the orange groves, danced in the flamenco bars, and echoed in the ancient plazas. For where there's smoke, there's fire, and where there's love, there's hope. And in the end, it was their love, fierce and enduring, that kept the light burning bright, even when it seemed that all hope had faded away. Gazing out over the sleeping city, they had chosen each other, and in doing so, had defied the conventions of their society, proving that love, when pure and true, could conquer all. The fiesta went on late into the night, the music celebrating their love, the food a feast of joy, the wine a toast to their future. Now blazed with renewed fervor, a beacon in the twilight of Seville, the culmination of Diego's world, the music, their language, and the applause was a chorus to their love story. In that moment, as he held Isabella's gaze, the world around them ceased to exist. There was just him, her, and the timeless melody of their love. The place where he poured his soul into every step, every gesture, every note. For Diego, this night was everything. It was a tribute to his heritage, a celebration of his passion, and above all, a testament to his love for Isabella. The decision she had to make was as heavy as the ancient stones of the Giralda, the bell tower of Seville Cathedral. In the smoky flamenco bars of Triana, he danced not just for the applause, his dark eyes holding the promise of a love that knew no bounds. But with him, there was the specter of his past, the shadow of El Gitano, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the corners of their love. But all Diego heard was Isabella's soft voice calling his name. He rushed to her, his eyes pleading, his heart pounding. And in that embrace, amidst the smoky haze and the fading strains of the guitar, his love unwavering, his faith in her absolute, he knew that she was the one that their love was destined to be, and he would not let her go without a fight. They found solace in each other's arms, their love rekindled in the fires of their shared pain, connected by the language they had forged in love and loss. As the music swelled, Diego poured every ounce of his being into his dance. Every twist and turn, every leap and dip, a testament to the love that burned brightly within him. This was his chance, his opportunity to make her understand, to make her see that their love was worth fighting for. But for Isabella, hoping that through the rhythm and the passion of his dance, he could reach her heart and make her see the depth of his love. Isabella's love, the vibrant colors of his life, once a tapestry woven with the threads of his passions, seemed to have dulled, leaving him in a world painted in shades of regret. Each flower she passed, whispering tales of a romance that was doomed from the start. Trapped in a maze of her own making, Isabella felt the walls closing in, the vibrant colors of Seville turning to shades of gray. Their faces hardened by years of a life on the streets, she refused to give in. The specter of Diego's past loomed over them, threatening to drive a wedge between them once more. Isabella, torn between her love for Diego and the expectations of her family and society, grappled with the decision that would define her future, clinging to the belief that true love conquers all. With renewed determination, she began to piece together the fragments of her life, determined to forge a new path forward, sent shivers down her spine. Their eyes, though, held a kindness that belied their rough exteriors, an acceptance and camaraderie that had been forged in the fires of a life shared. She dreamed of a life with him, a life of endless summer days and starlit nights, turned as dark and smoky as the flamenco night. In that moment, she realized that the man she loved was a mystery, a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit, a labyrinth with no exit. With a heart heavier than lead, she turned and fled, leaving behind the haunting strains of the guitar and the desperate call of Diego's love. The vibrant colors of her dreams seemed to fade, replaced by the harsh outlines of reality. Diego, sensing her shock, rushed to her side, his eyes mirroring the turmoil in her own. He tried to explain, his voice a tortured plea in the smoky haze. But words couldn't mend the chasm that had opened between them. A life where they would love passionately and live without a worry in the world. But their idyllic bubble was about to burst, revealing the harsh realities that lay beneath. By day, he was the son of Don Rafael, one of Seville's most respected families. By night, he became El Gitano, the leader of a notorious band of gypsies, outlaws shunned by society. His nights were spent dancing with the devil, living on the edge, a dangerous game that threatened to consume him completely. Delicate yet captivating, her spirit free as the soaring flamenco, danced through life with an abandon that drew all eyes to her. Yet she was as fragile as the Castile soap bubbles that drifted in the gentle breeze, untouched, unblemished, waiting for the day when her prince would come and sweep her off her feet. Then came Diego, a young man whose soul was as vast and deep as the star-studded Andalusian sky. His passion for life burned brightly, and his eyes, dark and intense, held the promise of a love that could move mountains. When he first saw Isabella, it was as if the world around them had faded away, leaving only him and her amidst the cobblestone streets and orange groves of Seville. They fell in love deeply, passionately, and their days were filled with stolen glances, secret smiles and whispered promises beneath the shade of the Plaza de Espaga. Their love story was the talk of the town, a melody on every Spaniard's lips. Isabella, sheltered and naive, knew nothing of Diego's double life. One fateful evening, as the castanets were clicking and the guitars were weeping soulful tunes in the smoky flamenco bars of Triana, in that moment, Isabella's world, once filled with the music of love and the scent of orange blossoms, the innocence in Isabella's eyes, the very thing that had drawn Diego to her, was now lost. She sought refuge in the familiar streets of her childhood, days turned into weeks, the pain of lost love, a constant companion. Yet in the depths of her despair, a flicker of hope remained. Meanwhile, Diego was consumed with guilt and remorse. He poured his anguish into his flamenco, the music becoming his only solace. One evening, as the mournful strains of the guitar filled the air and the clapping of castanets echoed the beat of his broken heart, in that instant, the world around them ceased to exist. When the song ended, the applause seemed deafening. But their reunion was not without its challenges, as the sun set over Seville, casting long shadows across the city. On one side there was Diego, the man who had captured her heart with his fiery passion. And then there was her life in Seville, a life of tradition and respectability. The weeks that followed were a torment for Isabella, yet through it all, Diego stood by her side. Then came the night of the great flamenco festival. As he danced, the plaza became their sanctuary. And as the final notes of the festival echoed through the plaza, Diego made his move. The entire plaza was silent, the music stilled. Taking a deep breath, Isabella stepped forward. In that moment, the plaza erupted in cheers, the music swelled, and Diego, with tears in his eyes, took her into his arms. They danced together under the watchful gaze of the ancient cathedral as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon. Theirs was a love story that would become a legend in Seville. Here's an old story that happened in a small town near where I live. This is a workshop, a wood shop, maybe 20 by 20 by 20 feet. It's tucked in between a funeral home and the back of a used car lot. The floor is stained concrete. The walls are lined with pegboards holding every conceivable kind of bit, drill, and hand tool. You can find places in this shop where sunlight hasn't touched the floor in 40 years. But if you look around, it's not cluttered. Every tool has its place. In fact, the first thing he ever built in this shop was a go-kart when he was 12. Living in a city apartment and working in a factory, Bones doesn't have any money left. The trip home drained his savings account. His grandfather's estate wasn't exactly flush with cash, and the bank is unexactly eager to lend money to a kid who just dropped out of a steady paycheck to start a risky business. So Bones is stuck at home with no money and no clear plan. Maybe it's the craftsmanship or the memories it holds, but he doesn't want to mess it up. So instead of trying to refine the design, Bones decides to honor his grandpa by keeping the Red Fox exactly how he left it. He saved every penny so he could eventually come back home to this shop and work for himself. As he skates around, he notices a group of kids watching him, their eyes full of wonder. Stops and introduces himself. They tell him how awesome the Red Fox is and ask if he can make them one too. But now, less than a year after his grandpa's death, Bones is back in this shop full-time. He can feel his grandpa's excitement from beyond the grave. Bones knows he can't let him down, so he starts sketching ideas for refining the design. He's shipping hundreds of boards every month, and his reputation as a craftsman is growing. But as the workload increases, so does the pressure. Bones finds himself working 7 days a week. He misses soccer practice and piano lessons, even misses his son's first steps. He's moved his wife and kids back to the small town where he grew up, and he's ready to make his dream come true, hiring more employees and investing in more equipment so he could take some time off. Then he remembers what his grandpa always used to say: "Don't ever get so busy making a living that you forget to make some life." At first he thinks it's just the wind, but then he hears it again. Someone is tapping on the wall, as if gently knocking the stories loose and letting them drift out into the world. Experiments with different woods and laminations until he's satisfied. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing, because as the workshop grows quiet, the stories settle into the walls. And there's nothing more important than that. And these 4 walls are more than just a shop. They're a legacy. It puts in 12 and 14-hour days. It's about remembering loved ones and honoring their memory. It's about finding beauty in the everyday and making the most of the time we have. He looks around the shop, really looks around for the first time in years. He sees the dust motes dancing in the sunbeam. He hears the birds singing outside. He smells the fresh sawdust and feels the smooth wood under his fingertips. Taking only a few minutes here and there to admire the view from his shop, he watches seasons change, the leaves turn color and fall away, only to return the following spring. He spends weeks shaping, sanding, and finishing each deck by hand. He orders a laser engraver to add the finishing touches. Stories of joy and sorrow, victory and defeat, love and loss. He hears his grandpa's laughter echoing through the rafters. He sees his grandpa's face in the grain of the wood. He feels his grandpa's presence beside him, a warm and comforting feeling. Each deck comes out a little bit better than the last. He hires a few friends to help with production and invests in better equipment. He even develops a line of longboards and snowboards. Then he redesigns the shape of the deck, making it wider and more stable. He buys a used CNC router and programs it to cut skateboard decks out of 3/4-inch maple plywood. The machine cuts fast and accurately, but it can't finish the job. Bones still has to sand and shape each deck by hand. He adds a kicktail for better maneuverability and strengthens the nose and tail for added durability. That go-kart led to snowmobiles, dirt bikes, even a few lawnmowers. By the time Bones was 18, he knew he wanted to be a machinist like his grandpa. One day, while he's reorganizing his grandfather's tool chest, Bones finishes a batch of 10 decks in a week. He takes them down to the skate park to test. The response is great. Everyone loves the new design. Below the drawing is a note reading: "Prototype complete. Needs refinement." Curiosity piqued, Bones goes out to the garage and finds a box labeled "Prototype." Inside is a beautifully crafted skateboard. The deck looks like it was made from a single piece of wood. The metal trucks are sturdy and well designed. There's a name laser etched into the bottom of the deck: the Red Fox. Bones finds a hidden compartment. Inside is a leather-bound journal. Bones opens it up and finds dozens of sketches, notes and reminders about projects his grandpa never finished. So right out of high school, he enrolled in a trade school. He graduated top of his class and got a job at a precision machine shop making computer parts. When he was a kid, he would often see his grandpa riding around town on a red sports bike. The two of them would ride the bike together when Bones was small enough to fit behind his grandpa. And the bike even had a sidecar so Bones could ride along with his little brother once he was born. Everything is within reach, but nothing is in the way. Bones remembers spending hours watching his grandpa work, shaping and sanding the deck of this very skateboard. Back then, Bones thought skateboards were just pieces of wood with wheels. But as he looks at the intricate curves of the Red Fox deck, he realizes there's a lot more to skateboards than meets the eye. The owner of this shop is a retired high school teacher who would rather be called by his nickname Lefty. Lefty built this shop himself when he retired 25 years ago, just before his 75th birthday. The doctors gave him 6 months to a year at best. He spent his last birthday here in this shop surrounded by his tools. He's working on one of his prized projects, a wooden replica of a classic British motorcycle. He finished the bike that year, and then he spent the next 2 years slowly finishing other projects, spending time with his grandkids, eating good food, and drinking better beer. He was a math teacher. So when he built this shop, he designed it for efficiency, everything in its place, maximum access, minimum wasted motion, and the design worked well until he got sick. Lefty's cancer diagnosis came 3 years ago, but this past spring, the cancer finally caught up to him, and Lefty died peacefully in his sleep, leaving this shop full of tools and half-finished projects to his only grandson, who would rather be called by his nickname, Bones. Now, Bones grew up spending summers in this shop. It was a sanctuary, a place where he could build anything he wanted out of wood. For the last 10 years, Bones has commuted back and forth across the country. Except there's a problem. He spends a few weeks sorting through his grandpa's things, cleaning up the shop and making minor repairs, all the while hoping for inspiration to strike. One drawing catches his eye. It's a detailed rendering of a longboard skateboard with a wooden deck and metal trucks. That name sparks a memory in Bones. Another memory surfaces. It's clear to Bones that this board is special. He takes the board down to the local skate park and gives it a try, and that's when it hits Bones. His grandpa's final project, the Red Fox skateboards. The first thing he wants to do is replace the metal trucks with wooden ones. This will make the board lighter and more durable.
Oh.
Once he's finished with the design, Bones starts building prototypes. Finally, Bones feels like he's done enough research, and he's ready to open his own shop. But with the help of the CNC router, production moves much faster. Over the next few months, Bones grows his business, building decks for local skaters and shipping orders nationwide. Before he knows it, Bones is busier than he's ever been. He starts thinking about scaling back, so Bones keeps pushing. Then one day, as the shop grows quiet, the stories settle into the walls. Bones stops what he's doing and listens. Bones leans against his workbench and closes his eyes. He listens as stories tumble out of the walls. When the stories end, the shop falls silent. Bones takes a deep breath and opens his eyes. In that moment, Bones understands. He doesn't need to be anywhere else. This is where he belongs. This is his home. His story is more than just about a wood shop. It's about family, legacy, and the importance of slowing down and appreciating the present moment. I hope you enjoyed this story. On the edge of town, by the old brickworks, stood the grand, majestic cinema, a picture palace with an ornate facade and enough seats to fill to school halls. It had been built in 1938 and was the pride of the community. People would dress up and make an evening of it. A businessman called Bill Compton had bought the building with the intention of turning it into a furniture store. He began work immediately, taking off the roof to install a flat roof. Putting steel girders in place of the ornate facade and boarding up the windows, his workers complained about the state of the place, followed by the liquid lounge, then déjà vu. None of them lasted long. The club eventually became a warehouse for an industrial hemp company, which caused even more problems. Dust fell from the ceiling in thick layers, and the smell of stale urine hung heavy in the air. Apparently, tramps had been sleeping there for years. This was approved, but during the conversion, the floors collapsed, and the building had to be demolished. Another failed project, several more years until one day a banner appeared on the wall saying Holiday Inn Express Hotel. For the most part, he kept himself to himself, preferring to speak to his plants rather than people. He had no family, and his friends had all moved away. Darren started to forget things. She was tall with long flowing hair and wore a red coat. Something about her reminded him of someone he once knew. But he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He watched her turn the corner and disappear from sight. He couldn't explain it, but he found himself smiling. He'd walk into a room and not know why he was there. Sometimes he would find himself talking to imaginary people, but she seemed to have vanished into thin air. He plastered the town with missing posters, but nobody had seen her. Darren was desperate, They hadn't done any structural surveys before buying the building, and now it seemed that the whole thing was listing to one side. The only way to stabilize it was to dig underneath and install piles. But this would mean digging through solid rock. Piles were driven underneath the building. But as the photographer focused his lens, the ground beneath them began to shake. Suddenly, the building shuddered violently from side to side. Bricks fell from the walls, and the chimney crashed through the roof. The couple screamed and ran for the hills. Crane after crane turned up to lift away the rubble. Foundations were dug and reinforced. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more. Concrete was poured, and steel supports were bolted in place. In its place, a block of flats is being built, and as the tower cranes move into position, the last photograph is taken. The dust will settle, and the story of the Grand Majestic will be forgotten forever. He contacted psychics, mediums, and anyone else who claimed to have special powers, but none of them could help. They took great pride in the building and wanted to pay homage to its history. They installed velvet curtains, chandeliers, and antique furniture. The local newspaper came to see how the project was coming along. An article was written and photographs taken. Harry and Hermione sued the local council for compensation, but this was denied. All they were offered was the price of the land, which they refused. He wasn't sure if he was losing his mind or just getting old. He put the house up for sale and moved into a care home. And what will happen when it's found? Find out in the next episode. Before leaving, he poured one last drink for Percy, thanked him for being a good listener, and left him with a bag of seeds. Then he closed the door and turned off the lights. Every evening, he would pour a drink for his pet parrot called Percy and tell him about his day. They planned to turn it into a luxury boutique hotel. It looked like a bomb site and smelled like a sewer. They shrugged it off and got to work. Day and night, they toiled over the building, slowly bringing it back to life. They ripped up carpets, stripped wallpaper, replaced windows, and uncovered original features that had been hidden for decades, complete with a fine dining restaurant and a cocktail bar. But as they stood there surveying their new purchase, they realized the scale of the task ahead of them. Darren loved the house and took great pride in it. He waxed the floors, polished the banisters, and arranged his furniture to face the magnificent stained glass window. He'd made his money importing luxury cars from Japan, then selling them to rich businessmen. He was looking for somewhere to live and decided to convert the former cinema into a house. Darren purchased the dilapidated building and moved in. He threw lavish parties, turning the ballroom into a dance floor and using the balcony as a smoking area. Years passed and the Holiday Inn became run down and seedy. Guests would leave their cars in the car park and disappear. Rooms were broken into, and the place became a magnet for antisocial behavior. Last thought, the residents. Something decent was going to be built. But they were soon to be disappointed. They'd take the bus into town, see a film, have some sweets, perhaps do a bit of shopping. Harris didn't want a furniture store, but he did want a nightclub. He began gutting the building, removing the false ceiling and replacing it with exposed beams. Then he installed a sprung dance floor and soundproofed the walls. When the licensing committee met to discuss the application, they objected because the property was in a residential area. But Harris bribed them, and the license was granted. Then take the bus home again, discussing the latest news and gossip on the way. By the 1970s, however, people no longer wanted to dress up and go out. They could buy a television at a time that suited them. The cinema went into decline, and the once busy thoroughfare outside became a car park. One cold November night in 1979, the Grand Majestic closed its doors for the final time. It remained empty for 20 years until one day a sign appeared above the door saying Majestic Furniture Store. The opening of the furniture store coincided with the death of Margaret Thatcher. The media showed footage of people dancing in the street, and Bill decided to join in. He danced all night and drank more than he should have. And when he woke up the next morning, he knew something was wrong. He had no recollection of the previous evening, and his body felt awful. As he tried to make his way downstairs, he collapsed and died from a brain hemorrhage. The business was left to Bill's widow, June, who promptly sold it to a Mr. Harris. Harris opened the club himself, but it went bust within a few weeks. Soon after, another club opened in its place called the Purple Turtle. One night, a fire broke out. The building was a total loss. The remains were cleared away, and the site lay dormant. A cheap motel was slapped up against the road. You can call it a motel. It was more like a concrete prison. Then one day, a planning application was submitted to turn the derelict motel into apartments. A few months later, a developer named Darren Royal came along. Darren lived in the building alone apart from a housekeeper who came in every day to tidy up and cook him meals. But as time passed, he began to feel lonely. One afternoon, Darren was standing at the front window watching the traffic go by when a woman walked past. From that moment on, Darren began to fixate on the idea of finding the woman. He searched everywhere. In the end, Darren decided to do something drastic. The new owner of the Grand Majestic was a young couple called Harry and Hermione Gumboldt. For a start, the building had been stripped bare, and all that remained were 4 bare brick walls. They dreamed of throwing open the doors and hosting their first function in the summer of 2024. There was just one problem. The building was 86 years old and had been neglected for decades. It was also 10 feet deep into the ground. Finally, the lien was corrected, and the building was stable. Harry and Hermione could finally relax and start decorating. Harry and Hermione beamed as they stood in front of their creation. An investigation revealed that the building was too unstable to renovate. It needed to be demolished. And so the Grand Majestic Cinema stood abandoned for another year before it was finally demolished. That is, until someone discovers the time capsule buried beneath the car park. What's inside it? How long will it stay hidden? Thank you for watching. If you're still here, your eyes heavy and your mind drifting softly, thank you for sharing this quiet moment with us. If this story brought you peace tonight, don't forget to subscribe so you can return tomorrow and lose yourself again in the calm world of forgotten places and whispered memories. Sleep well. And until next time, good night.
Hi guys, please subscribe my channel.